everybody. How's it going? Just bring the energy here today, right? All right. Well, I'm glad I got the intro so I can take one thing off my list. I was curious why they asked me to moderate this opening session. At first, I thought it was because of my charm and my incredible jawline, like telling jokes. But then my wife said, "No, sorry." So the part of the intro that you heard, it's got 3 reasons why I'm here today. To reiterate, one, as was shared, I lead partnership strategy for Greater MSP, which is the economic development partnership for the metro area. So anything that's about building the next economy, we're focused on, and everybody in this room is trying to do that too. So thanks for being here and being a part of building Minnesota's next economy. Second reason I'm here, as Michaela shared, is there's part of Greater MSP that's been focused on working with venture capital and others in our innovation ecosystems through initiatives like this effort to activate, recruit, train, prepare, and connect more angel investors. So whether you've been angel investing for years or decades, or whether this is new to you, or whether you're exploring it, thanks for being part of the journey, and we want to keep you on that conveyor belt. And the third, as was mentioned, connected to this particular panel, is Minnesota's effort to look at the future of the global medical technology industry and how we work together across sectors and across institutions to make sure that Minnesota maintains and grows its leadership in that space. And that effort is led by the CEOs of many institutions, including the Mayo Clinic and Destination Medical Center, who you're going to learn from today. I'm so glad to be here. Get my notes as we get going. We have an incredible panel we're going to hear from today. I'm going to introduce them kind of one at a time as I ask them questions. So we'll share a little bit about their bios as we go. Before we get started, a couple other things to know. I'm also, in addition to that economic development role, I'm an active early stage investor. I've put my money where my mouth is in terms of investing in the future. So I'm trying to channel all of these incredibly bright people who are leaders in their field to you might be sitting and thinking, how is this maybe going to give me an edge in my particular investing? That's kind of what I'm trying to channel today. Because we know, right, that those that are in vibrant innovation ecosystems anywhere in the world, with incredible scientists and researchers and entrepreneurs and institutions, whether that's government or universities or corporations, you have an unfair competitive advantage if you're near some really incredible stuff that's at the leading edge of any industry. And that's what you're going to hear today is happening down in Rochester. So I'm really glad to be a part of it. And the only other thing I'm sure you'll hear more today, but just to level set, I think we all know Mayo Clinic. But Mayo Clinic is the largest integrated not-for-profit medical group practice in the world. Experts have been working together for more than 150 years in an integrated team-based approach to solve the most challenging unmet needs of patients. And I think we're all proud as Minnesotans that Mayo Clinic has more #1 rankings than any other hospital, I think, in the world. And 1.3 million patients from more than 130 countries, including my mom in recent months, visit Mayo Clinic campuses each year. Great investments don't happen by chance, they happen by design, and Rochester's creating more investment opportunities by helping startups de-risk their ideas. We're going to hear about that today. So we're going to start with Chris Shad. And Chris leads ecosystem development for Discovery Square, Destination Medical Center. Discovery Square is a mixed-use urban life science hub. It's adjacent to Mayo Clinic in Rochester. Evenings and weekends, you'll find him trying to solve the puzzle of business ownership himself. As the founder and CEO of a CPG company, he's got a Bachelor of Science in Biology and a Master's in Business Administration with an emphasis on entrepreneurship. He's become a good friend over the last year or two. So Chris, what should all of us know as investors that we might not know already about Rochester and the Mayo Clinic specifically?
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's glad to have so many new friends so close to me here on the stage. This is not uncomfortable at all. So my name is Chris Shad. I've been with Mayo Clinic for a long time, scientist by training. Found myself in evolving roles over the years with Mayo over the last 39 years at Mayo Clinic. The last 8 years I've been with Destination Medical Center Economic Development Agency, a special purpose EDA that was spun up as a consequence of some historic investment in Rochester by the state of Minnesota. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on that, just to sort of set the context of our thesis here, which is Mayo Clinic from its earliest days has been traveling the world and bringing innovation back to its practice in order to treat its patients better and clinicians from around the world have been traveling to Rochester to learn about what's going on in Rochester to take that technology back to their patients around the world. And the short version of that is, if you want to know where healthcare is going, you need to understand where Mayo Clinic is going and the investment opportunities that follow on from that. The GMC Economic Development Agency was spun up as a result of this legislation back in 2013, where the state of Minnesota made a 20-year, $600 million commitment to the city of Rochester. Just let those words sink in for a minute, right? 20 years, $600 million funneled into 1 square mile of downtown Rochester for infrastructure. And infrastructure means the stuff under the streets, it means parks on top of the streets and mobility systems, better ways of moving people around. But in the context of this conversation, it means building an innovation district called Discovery Square, where technology companies are taking their technology to market, partnering with Mayo and other organizations. So on our EDA team, there are 5 of us that are focused on Discovery Square. And we have people that are out traveling the world, finding technology and bringing it back to Rochester, bringing it back to Minnesota for consideration. We have people that are building the life sciences ecosystem, not only buildings, but spaces within buildings that early stage companies can use to grow, working with Mayo experts shoulder to shoulder. And then we have people like myself who are building that supportive ecosystem. What kind of access do those companies need to service providers, to capital, to workforce? And really importantly, what kind of access points do they need to Mayo Clinic? And I'm going to turn this over to Brian, I think, next. So we have a lot of partner organizations inside of Mayo Clinic, research, practice, education, and a key partner for us is the Innovation Exchange. And I won't try to describe the Innovation Exchange, but I'll let Brian do that. But, that's really good about who we are as an organization. So.
Well, I've got one part question for you in case you want to elaborate. That public-private partnership, which is just down the road, over the last year, I've had the privilege to drive back and forth, not just to Rochester, but also from like SFO to parts of Silicon Valley. And the drive from here to Rochester is a lot shorter. We're one place, right? But tell us more about that public-private partnership, and something that maybe investors should take note of about how nearby that is.
So it's a true public-private partnership. There's a lot of money from the state that's going into this. There's a lot of investment by Mayo Clinic into this, a lot of investment by the city of Rochester that goes into this. And we make ourselves better by making ourselves bigger. And Rochester has always been sort of the southern leg, if you will, or the southern anchor of the medical alley ecosystem that we have in Rochester. We just, in the years past, we've not had that intentionality around making that distance feel shorter. And if you compare that geography to other really well-known geographies, be it Research Triangle Park or other places, it's the same physical distance. Just for some reason, it's felt longer here. And what we're doing is by building partnerships and collaborations here in the cities and down in Rochester, we're trying to effectively shorten that distance by having more intentionality around partnerships and collaborations.
Thanks, Chris. Brian. So Brian's a principal business strategist for the Mayo Clinic Innovation Exchange. In his 15 years at Mayo, he's developed strategy for everything from international market entry to innovative healthcare practices, and has a soft spot for the role of laboratory diagnostics in healthcare. He credits Mayo Clinic for teaching him that innovation has to be rooted in values. Brian holds a JD in undergraduate philosophy, so we're getting an interesting combination of insight today. So Brian, Mayo Clinic Innovation Exchange is this incredible global platform that I've got to know just a little bit about in recent years for early stage sourcing and curation, and it's built on the model that we refer to at the world's best hospitals. So can you tell us how the Innovation Exchange platform works? Because I think about it as this incredible magnet for innovation around the world.
It definitely was an element, and I'm happy to tell you how it works. Thank you for the opportunity and the audience for having us today. I knew the angel audience would be a smart audience, but I didn't think it'd be so good looking. Wow. Congratulations.
You're welcome.
The exchange is a very simple concept. The way we help innovators, we basically took the Mayo Clinic model of care, which is so effective, and said, let's apply that model to innovation. So a point for effectiveness, maybe not a point for originality for the exchange. But what it does do really effectively is connect innovators to that resource they need to be successful. And how do we do that? Let's look to that Mayo Clinic model of care that maybe your mom experienced. I have chest pain. I go in and see a cardiologist. That's a world-class cardiologist. The cardiologist thinks, boy, this isn't a cardiology issue. Maybe something's going on with the lungs. So I am able, in a team environment like Mayo Clinic, to send the patient to the right expert in my practice. So the patient goes over and sees a world-class pulmonologist. Pulmonologist said, yes, this is a lung disorder. I'm not sure how to treat it. Maybe I can consult with a colleague, perhaps Dr. Reisner, who's an expert in lung surgeries and treatments. And so these three colleagues work together to help the patient get where they want to go. We said, why not do the same for innovators? Come, put a team around them, put the innovator at the center, and help them move through that journey. Does the innovator need an angel investor? We know a few in this room that maybe we can connect them. But we don't just connect them to any angel investor. We connect them to the right one for their particular thing, using the learnings from the Mayo Clinic model of care. Who's that right resource for the right innovator at the right time? We are serving a global community. We have members that come into our exchange from 50 different countries now. They work on health tech, med tech, diagnostics, new drugs. And of course, AI is one of the big things happening. I'm sure many of you are interested in. The question is, how does that integrate with the practice? All these tech companies are like, I got a new tech thing. But how does that interact with the patient world? So we try to create an exchange to bring them in so they can understand, what does this piece of tech do with the healthcare environment? How can we increase its relevancy for this audience? We are a benefactor model, and this is important, I think, for an angel audience to understand about how we work with companies. We are not taking equity in these companies. We are not taking shares. We're not doing anything like that. We're just asking, like the Mayo Clinic model, what's the next best step for these innovators? So in doing so, we think we're really profoundly de-risking them by making them incredibly relevant for the healthcare market, the leaders, Mayo Clinic, and then helping put them on a path of discipline, step by step through the process, without an influence on, is this going to move our particular P&L a certain way? I think that's it. If there are any questions, please let us know.
Well, we'll come back and dig a little more into that. I mean, having experienced, my mom's side over the last few months and for many months to come, that model in practice and the obsessive dedication to that patient, and to be in a position where your life is on the line and you are leaving with the confidence and the inspiration that things are going to be okay because of that model. So if you take that, you think about that, that's your filter for an innovator who you want to work with, right? And I imagine it's not easy on that innovator. But if an innovator makes it through that pipeline, from an investor perspective, that's a pretty good due diligence.
They come in thinking, hey, Mayo's going to help me test my product, but in effect, we're testing the company. It's a proving ground. Can you work with these world-class people? Can you work where the decisions aren't, maybe it works, let's see. No, it has to work. What's your evidence? And if you can pass this proving ground, as you rightly said, man, it's a strong signal that this is an investable idea and a commercializable idea because it's been through a gauntlet of testing.
Well, let's take a look at the research side. So Dr. Eisenhower, next up. So Dr. Eisenhower, Director of Medical Degree from the University of Alabama in Birmingham. We're still working on the weather up here, Dr. Eisenhower. She completed her general surgery residency and cardiothoracic surgery fellowship at Mayo Clinic College of Medicine in Rochester. She's the first thoracic surgeon to complete the interventional pulmonary medicine fellowship and obtain dual certification in surgery and pulmonology. In addition to her clinical activities, Dr. Rice now is an active leader in research and education. She's the division chair of thoracic surgery, the former inaugural vice chair for innovation for the Department of Surgery, and the newly appointed inaugural medical director for research innovation and business development. So in this role, she'll lead efforts to identify business development opportunities that advance Mayo's research strategy and lead research efforts in something you're going to hear about later, the Bold Forward Unbound initiative to enhance the connection between practice and research. She's also the chair of the Bridge to Bold Forward Unbound in Rochester's surgical subcommittee. She reports to the surgical and procedural committee who's charged with collaborating with all of the House of Surgery colleagues to identify innovations in technology, tools, design, and other areas that impact the surgical practice, people, and spaces. Dr. Eisenhower, I've got to imagine the research landscape has been fundamentally shifting in recent years, and we have all these global advancements that reference artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. There's so many implications for novel drug discovery, therapies. Can you tell us more about the role of Mayo Clinic research in this broader innovation strategy?
Yeah, thanks so much, and thanks for having us this morning. I can testify to Chris's comments about it being a very short drive. Somebody has to drive up for this panel and then drive shortly back afterwards to take care of some practice issues. So thanks for having us. As you mentioned, I'm a thoracic surgeon at Mayo Clinic, but then also dabble in research innovation, business development aspect. That role was newly created just over the past 8 to 9 months, because we've recognized with the evolving landscape and the need for innovation to bridge barriers, to build bridges and be interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary, as our practice model of care has always been. We need to do the same with innovation and think creatively about how we're interfacing with our ecosystem. Mayo Clinic's Bold Forward strategy, which you'll hear a little bit more about, is centered on 3 cornerstone pillars, which are cure, connect, and transform. And cure is where the research field is heavily focused and leaned in. All of those pillars are going to support innovation, and what we mean by that when we say support innovation is identify the talent and empower those people by putting them in an environment and resources that allow them to then go forward and succeed. So as we talk specifically about cures, what do we mean by that? It's really bringing new treatments directly to the patient, directly to the market, directly to the bedside with something that the providers have access to. It's not just doing something in a lab and publishing a manuscript. That's important, but accelerating scientific discovery by bringing a translatable solution is something that we're really leaned in on and heavily focused on, and I think mirrors nicely with some of the changes that Chris and Brian described as our Mayo Clinic centered approach. To do those things, we've leaned in heavily on novel drug discoveries, new medical therapies, new ways to do surgery, and smarter ways to do surgery. We're really relying upon tools like data intelligence and AI. So one example that the research field is really leaned in on is something called our Research Data Atlas. We're beginning to, through the infrastructure of the Mayo Clinic platform, we're creating large multimodal data streams comprised of multi-omics data with biorepositories, large patient samples and specimens, in conjunction with digital pathology. And we think understanding patient biology on a cellular and molecular level, collating that with data intelligence and data insights to drive new cures and new therapies is our approach. And as I said before, I don't think that we could do that successfully as an isolated silo. We recognize that to do that, we need to lean heavily on our scientific expertise and our plethora of clinical expertise and knowledge, but then also partner that with knowledge and insights from the outside. And so that's where we're working really hard to partner with research and business development. That's why my role was created as a bridge between the two, but then also working with other entities, both in the public and private space, to really bring that innovation to the bedside.
That's awesome. That MedTech 3.0 strategy that was referred to earlier, I think maybe Jim Southwick is the managing director of that coalition might be. He's actually leading that effort now. But one thing we're trying to do in Minnesota is make Minnesota the best place for innovators around the world that would like to develop a data agreement, like to work with the Mayo Clinic platform to do that. And in some cases, that's going to be working with the Mayo Clinic platform. And in other cases, there's a emerging platform at the University of Minnesota led by a center called the Center for Learning and Health System Sciences. We have a consortium of all the other providers in Minnesota that work together on electronic health records requests. There's all sorts of interface, but if you're an innovator, navigating that could take months or years and a big legal team. You want to make that easier to drive more of those connections. I'm going to go next to Dr. Arndt. Before I ask the question, a little bit of a bio. So, Dr. Katie Arndt is the professor of anesthesiology, vice chair of the Department of Anesthesiology, and perioperative medicine at Mayo Clinic, and leading people in culture. So, Dr. Arndt is also the associate medical director for Bold Forward Unbound in Rochester, which is Mayo Clinic's strategic initiative to transform healthcare. Big initiative. Dr. Arndt completed her residency in anesthesiology at Mayo Clinic, her fellowship at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School, and a regional anesthesiology fellowship at Mayo. She initiated the ACGME accredited, am I saying this right? Obstetric, like testing by, not here for my science, right? Anesthesiology fellowship program at Mayo Clinic. Dr. Arndt's American Board of Anesthesiology Oral Board Examiner, and has served on the board of directors for the Society of Obstetric Anesthesia and Perinatalology. Her research interests include management of patients with complex cardiac disease, on which she's published over 70 peer-reviewed publications, and she's invited to speak throughout the world, through which she works to inspire safer and more satisfying childbirth experiences. So, Dr. Arndt, as if all of this wasn't exciting enough, Mayo Clinic fairly recently announced the Bold Forward Unbound initiative, which is a multi-billion-dollar investment in the physical and digital infrastructure that's needed to build and deliver the next generation healthcare model. That's happening here in Minnesota, as well as in Arizona and Florida, Mayo Clinic's other campuses, and around the world. So, can you give us a sense of what types of investments these investors and clients are on the horizon, and what that might mean for future innovations coming out of Rochester or being attractive around the world to Rochester?
You got it, Matt. I'm sorry I gave you such a long introduction. I should have shortened that up a little bit.
A lifelong learner, just having to be learning every day.
I didn't realize you were going to read the whole thing. All right. So, you guys, Mayo Clinic is built on innovation. For 160 years, we've built physical infrastructure that drives both our medical innovation as well as our innovation in healthcare delivery. And that's exactly what we're doing here. It's a once in three generation investment. $5 billion, 2.4 million square feet of space, 1.8 million square feet of clinical space alone. It's absolutely amazing. And so when you really think about that on scale, it's the largest single private investment in the history of the state of Minnesota. It's a big deal right down the street down there in the middle of a cornfield in Rochester, Minnesota, where we happen to be, as we've said multiple times, the #1 hospital in the world. And we'll keep saying that over and over again, just FYI. So essentially, as we look back at our history, how many people have been down to Rochester? All right, we know the Plummer Building. So the Plummer Building was built around this absolutely incredible medical innovation, which was the written medical record. Before that time, there was no such thing as a medical record, and Henry Plummer came along and said, hey, you know what? Now that we've innovated into a group practice, we should write some things down about patients and send them on to each other. And so there are pneumatic tubes throughout that building, which you could put the medical record in, and they would suck the medical record to the next specialist who would read about that patient before the patient arrived. And man, we were on the cutting edge, right? Well, here we are today, back on the cutting edge. There is so many more cures that we need to find in medicine, right? We need to be curing ALS and pancreatic cancer and all these things that young people are dying of that we should not be dying of anymore. We have so many new amazing transformations. And right here, our Dr. Reisenauer and all of our research teams, we are looking to do all sorts of transformations in order to be able to drive that, to drive better patient care, to advance our teamwork together, drive more cures, right? So you said, what kind of investments? And you didn't know I would just keep on talking, did you, man? So I would say we could categorize those for three things. So number one, investments in what we call our three shield integration. So when we talk about Mayo Clinic's three shields, what we mean is our clinical practice. So how we keep the needs of the patients first, how we deliver care at the bedside. So clinical practice, research, and education. And the more we integrate those three shields, the more we are able to drive transformation and better cures. So we will be investing in that in various different ways in order to make sure that Dr. Reisenauer's team has the space and the technologies and the partnerships in order to drive that transformation forward, integrating all three of those shields. Second, I would say let's go with talent. All right. So Mayo Clinic is the #1 hospital in the world because of its staff. All right. So we are both looking to attract the best and the brightest physicians, which we already do. But this investment is bringing even more of those. Further, there's a halo effect. So additional researchers, bioscience, administrators, engineers, all sorts of people as a result are coming down to Rochester. And it's really incredible. We also need to thank all of the higher education institutions that have in Rochester that are part of helping us train this talent. And then our third, I would say, major way that we want to invest is in our partnerships. And so let me just give you an example as far as our partnerships. Right now, we could talk a little bit later about predictive delivery if you want, but Mayo Clinic has a vision as to how to move stuff around hospitals, and it involves a lot of robotics and automation. We are not a robotics and automation company. We need partners, and our very early pilot work with that has really partnered with a lot of different companies in order for us to do that and advance those ideas. We couldn't do it alone. So those partnerships are really important to us now, and they'll become even more so in the future.
It's a lot of exciting things happening. Nothing else, Dr. I'm going to know when I walk out of the gate to Cold Victory tonight. I see those three shields across the street. What that means. So I'm going to go back to Chris. We're going to do a little popcorning now. Just everybody. So Chris, the Destination Medical Center team is all over the world. Every week, every month, my teams do it in countries all over the world. So can you tell me about that net that you're now casting from Rochester to find companies with go-to-market ready technologies?
Sure. So our hockey season is done, but if it were still going on, I would put this under the category of more shots on goal. So how do we find technology that isn't originating here? And how do we find ways to get that technology here so that it can partner up with the experts of the Innovation Exchange who taps into the expertise of like Dr. Reisenauer and Dr. Arndt here in order to make it market ready? We have the ability to get out and find companies around the world. We travel to other markets. It started with finding technology companies themselves. It has evolved to finding partnerships with cluster organizations around the world. So we go to those innovation hotspots around the world and we find the organizations that are supporting the companies that have the kinds of technologies that we think have promise. Because they keep an evergreen list of the companies. You don't have to maintain those lists of those companies. We work with those cluster organizations. I think Brian is going to be able to comment on how they were working with those organizations overseas. But we go there, we tell the story of Minnesota, we sell the story of Rochester and Mayo Clinic. They know about Mayo Clinic, they don't necessarily know that it's a place to do business. It has become a place to do business, and we tell the story. So last year, as an example, we talked to over 1,300 companies around the world. Out of that came 250 opportunities. And there are now a handful of companies that are doing business in Rochester and in Minnesota because of that effort. So you see the wide funnel that we have to deploy, right? 1,300 companies means 250 opportunities, which means a handful of companies that are now doing business in Minnesota. But if we don't go out and find them, they're not going to come here. And so we have that intentionality around how do we find them? How do we build relationships with them? How do we connect them into the Innovation Exchange and other groups so that they can figure out, is their technology really what they think it is? Does it have the promise that they think it has? And then how do we get it to market?
Well, let's do that handoff. So explain the Innovation Exchange, right? So can you go a little bit deeper in how that helps companies de-risk technology?
Sure. The way we do that is by working with Chris and his team and looking at hotspots of technology. So to give a couple quick examples, Dr. Armand mentioned robotics, automation. We have some partnerships in Germany where they have leading companies in how to do robotics and automation in certain industries. How do you take that thinking and bring it to a place like Mayo Clinic? We have hotspots in Asia, in the Nordics. And what we do with those groups is put together what we call a milestone-based approach. What companies are working on things that would matter to patients? Again, patient-centric thinking, as you heard the doctors describe. And how can we set the companies on milestones to get to that patient's interaction or relevance for that patient? Milestones are things you all know really well. Do you have evidence? Have you validated that evidence? Do you have enough to go to regulatory? Companies get lost in there and they get bad advice, they go all over the place. So this milestone based is an agreement between ourselves and the organization that's pushing this company across. Could be an economic group, could be a VC, could be whomever. And we help the company meet milestones. I'll give you an example. One of the hotspots that I like for the people that are still awake and heard my bio, I enjoy a diagnostic company. We took in a company that's early stage looking at how early can we catch certain prostate cancers. That's exciting, right? What if you could catch prostate cancer from the house with a little tool? That fulfills the Unbound mission. How do we take care of people at the home, right? So we always think they're connecting. So we take that company and say, okay, you're early stage, you need some evidence. Let's pair you with a urologist inside Mayo Clinic to run an early stage trial, get some evidence. They complete that task, move to the next stop. Maybe it's a larger trial. They get some FDA evidence. Now they have evidence to go to the FDA. And we work with them step by step, just the way Mayo Clinic doctors work step by step with their patients. The way we're also trying to help is the money that's needed to do these things. So we're setting up relationships in country in some of these hubs or in some of the hotspots in the US where people see this milestone and they say, okay, I want my companies to go through it, so I will support those milestone activities that the companies are doing. So I'll help sponsor the clinical trial, I'll help sponsor this, and then together, with everybody involved, we're moving companies closer to the patient.
It's incredible. Dr. Eisenhower, bring it back to research. So we know the focus that academic institutions have on research, but how's Mayo Clinic research looking differently in your relationships with industry, particularly with the companies that have these tried but not fully tested technologies?
That's a good question. I think our approach has shifted a little bit over the last year to 2 years. And I think a lot of it leans actually on what Brian was talking about as it relates to the innovation exchange. There's tons of interesting research and technologies that we can cultivate internally inside Mayo Clinic, but where we get really excited is when an outside company comes to us and says, here's what I think is a solution for an unmet need. Is that accurate? And the conversation starts with meeting with a clinical KOL, a key opinion leader, to say, is that right or is that not? Is that actually an unmet need, or is that such a small problem that the solution that you propose is not something that's easily adoptable or tenable for a patient or feasible for a provider? And as these conversations start to matriculate and mature and a relationship is built, as Brian mentioned, the next step becomes, well, then how do we work together to turn a concept into a prototype, into an MVP, and how do we continue to advance that? And so I think it's a layered approach. It starts with the conversation and building the trust between the company and Mayo Clinic. It then iterates to the point of being able to do a clinical trial with Mayo Clinic investigators. And that may not necessarily be going straight to doing a clinical trial in a patient. There's a company that's outside of the U.S. They're a digital they're an IPO, publicly traded company. They're very interested in digital scanning and digital pathology, and they were looking at integrating that into the operating for potentially in vivo detection or integrating with surgical technologies for a better, faster, integrated digital pathology approach. And so they actually moved a portion of their company, set up a piece of their company within Rochester, which now allows them to have very meaningful and direct face-to-face interactions with colleagues, which, yes, Zoom can accomplish some of that, but there's a huge difference between just being able to walk across the street and meeting with somebody and showing them something and getting their opinion. That lends itself to much more facile benchtop testing and prototype testing, which in and of itself is research as well. And so it's a multi-layered partnership that starts with some clinical know-how, that starts with some feedback, and then builds into some benchtop and prototype testing that then lends itself to SBIR, potentially grant funding or other non-dilutive funding, which then paves the way to inpatient, first in human, and multi-phased trials.
Dr. Aaron, some of the things that you were teasing, the more I learn about them are, exciting and scary to me at the same time. And while I, don't understand all the science, I certainly understand the impact on me. Who I love, which makes me think it's an opportunity, that's going to be relevant to everybody across the planet. But can you tell us more about what you teach about what predictive delivery is? Tell us more about what's coming or what you're looking at.
Sure. So as we build this infrastructure, we have a vision for how our whole campus downtown is going to be reimagined. It has been reimagined. And essentially, predictive delivery is this idea that our healthcare workers, physicians, the nurses, need to have the right stuff at the right time at the right place. And you think that sounds pretty simple, but within a hospital or healthcare organization, it's really not. There's a ton of movement of goods around. And so one part of our transformative vision is predictive delivery. And so through robotics and automation, delivering people what they need, right time, right place. About a half a block away from our major hospital, we're building another building, which is our logistics center. And as you come off Civic Center Drive, trucks would come into that building. They would then go into the building where goods could get binned and so on, and then through a series of tunnels deliver back up and through the Osmond and Waterman building and over into our other buildings as well in order to automate our delivery. We're both looking at that initial part of the delivery as well as last mile automated delivery of goods. And that's for goods coming in and waste going out as well. It's a really big deal. You need to design around it as far as elevators, lots of partnerships. That's just one of many sort of innovations that we're looking at in order to transform healthcare, to be able to scale our transformations within healthcare, which we think are a really big deal.
So we should add something. Yeah. So I think if you're picking up on this, we're talking about two different areas of innovation that we're looking for technologies. One is in healthcare itself, devices, diagnostics, theranostics. The other is where are the technologies that on the infrastructure side of things? So the moving stuff around sorts of technologies, right? We're trying to find the best and the brightest kinds of technologies, not only on the care, but on the delivery of the care. We were talking earlier, sort of backstage, like you have a car, you're driving down the road in the middle of the night, and it detects that a car is coming the other direction, and your car's high beams automatically flip to low beams. The company that developed that technology has adapted that technology into the OR in a lighting system in the ceiling that can, and an array of lights that can detect where the surgical team hands and bodies are and selectively dim and brighten lights actively real time as surgery is taking place to reduce shadows. Because you don't want a shadow under where you're working, I would imagine, if you're cutting somebody open. That's too
Minor detail.
right? So it's not just the diagnostics, it's not just the devices, it's actually the infrastructure all around healthcare that we're looking for those technologies.
Okay, so I'm in the room. I'm like, I have invested in healthcare. I'm open to it, but I've got a lot to learn. I'm convinced that there's some sort of engine of innovation happening in Rochester and around Mayo that I didn't fully understand or appreciate. Let's assume I'm in that space. How do I connect? Like when I go down to Mayo, they have like world-class positions. And obviously, it's actually nice to hang out there. But do I just go down there and hang out? Do I show up at your house? Like, how do I access this ecosystem as someone who's looking for deals?
We get that question a lot, and from the outside, like any large organization, Mayo appears monolithic, and of course it's not monolithic. And the frustrating part in the past has been that there can be so many front doors. You're not sure who's going to open a particular door. And our objective, especially the work that Brian and I are doing, is trying to reduce the number of front doors to a much smaller number. And so our organization, through myself and our team and Brian's organization, we're finding that we can help be sort of that navigator to that front door. So I think the short answer is, Brian.
I think going back to this, we keep picking on the Mayo Clinic model of care. Where do you start with your patient? Maybe you start with one doctor and they get you to the right place, get to the right place, get the right. We think of our role as very similar for people that are interested in innovation. I'm an angel investor. Maybe I have a thesis that I don't know anything about healthcare, like you're saying, and I want to get involved. Glad to help and see where we could fit in the Mayo DMC ecosystem. Maybe you are in healthcare and you're looking for a very narrow industrial thing that would fit what Dr. Arndt's describing, or a research thing that Dr. Rice is describing. We can play a role to help you get to the right people at the clinic. And as Chris said, there are many front doors, there are many people, but they all serve a very particular purpose. So it's really aligning the two people and having a friendly, knowledgeable way to do that is what we like to do.
Great. And you, the two of you, are like will be around this morning if folks want to connect and find out more about even like events and things that happen throughout the year that you should be more connected to. So I'm giving the hug in a couple of minutes. So I think I want to wrap up with one last question. It could be for anybody. So keeping on that theme, I'm interested in deal flow. Can anybody share an example of maybe a company that's come through the ecosystem in the last couple of years that you were really excited about, or something else that you're looking at today to give people a sample of the types of innovations we're seeing around the world? Yeah. Do like we'll wrap it.
Yeah, I'll do it real quick. So the one that I'm really excited about is early detection of disease. And can you detect something from the house? And we're working right now with a group at Mayo to do some really complicated stuff in the, I got to be a little cautious here, man. Can you use a particular blood test to get an answer rapidly at home? And these are where I'm most excited, because so much of healthcare is based on diagnostics. So we're taking in a few companies that can get 1 or 2 hours, a very strong indicator of what's going on in the disease.
Real quickly, a company out of Ontario that has, the founder has a son born with cerebral palsy. He's a little bit older. They're trying to teach him how to walk effectively, and he was frustrated with the tools that were available. He's an engineer. He's developed a foot pad that goes into the shoes that's studded with sensors that detect pressure, that detect acceleration, that the gait, the length of the stride, but also haptic sensors that give immediate feedback on less pressure there that way to help his son travel. But if you think more broadly about the capabilities that, how you could extend that technology for patients with Parkinson's or ALS or some of these other, ways to provide some immediate feedback. So that individual now is having a conversation with MedTech 3.0 team about how do they get engaged in the MedTech industry here, and how do they connect in with the Mayo ecosystem to find the physicians and researchers.
I'll take a surgical, there's tons of areas that we're interested in. The research field is interested in organ salvage. How do you recover and restitute an organ before it gets so chock full of cancer that the only option for that patient is chemotherapy? Or the organ has failed so bad that the patient is now on dialysis awaiting a kidney transplant, or they're on the heart-lung machine and they can't leave the hospital and they're sitting there waiting for a heart-lung transplant. So some of the things that the research field is really interested in is, are there new and novel therapies that at a cellular and molecular level can reverse course, rejuvenate organs, a little bit of anti-aging, and take something that's maybe at stage 3 failure, and rather than it knowing that it'll naturally progress to stage 4, how that progressed to stage 2. So this is still very much conceptual and very much in the ideation phase, but we're starting the process of meeting with companies that are out there that are interested in the same space, and how can we partner together and build a collaborative effort and team around that together, and come up with some new ideas and find fundings and build a team around those ideas to really bring this.
And I'm most excited as an anesthesiologist about remote monitoring and the ideas behind taking various different remote sensors and being able to predict before patients deteriorate, get sick, get an infection, and so on. And both that is predictive for before they actually get sick, but then also as they're recovering from anesthesia or from surgery to know, yeah, they are on the right trajectory and so on. Be able to get patients not necessarily within hospital walls, but outside of hospital walls, still getting the same level of care that they would get within hospital walls.
It's wonderful.
I got one more I shouldn't leave out for this audience. My favorite company that came in, they're from Japan, and they came in with a pitch. There are more adult diapers sold in Japan than baby diapers this year. Not for this audience, I'm sure, but they're developing a new approach to treating that doesn't require some of the harsh mesh and other things. So I think just wanted to get that message of what are the problems out there Mayo's likely interested.
Adult diapers come for us all. Yeah. Well, I hope, even beyond what's happening in Rochester, what's happening in the healthcare space, you got a flavor for, Minnesota's innovation ecosystem, thing that we really think makes us unique. Obviously, everybody here that's investing is focused on returns. If we're solving real problems, right, and exporting those solutions to the world because the problems we're solving have universal application to the world, that is where the opportunity is. And that's when Minnesota's economy has been at its best, and that's where the investment opportunities have been at their best. So I want to thank you all for what you've dedicated your lives and careers to doing, which is solving real problems that matter to each of us around the world. Thank you for sharing your expertise.